All right. Thanks for hopping on the code review weekly workshop. Uh, we have some things to talk about pertaining to code review. I've got interesting thing related to reviewing these MRs I get pinged on regularly involving sourcegraph. I actually just now, while I was trying to close out all the windows, I managed to do that. I closed out all the windows, including the agenda doc I didn't want to close out.
You need a link or you're fine?
No, I'm back. Okay, let's do it. So let me share my screen here. So we're looking at the same thing. And so every once in a while I get pinged on these dependency updates. This is our integration with sourcegraph, which provides the code intelligence on blob and MR views when you click on whatever, whether it's like a keyword or function name. You can see some descriptions and references and links to going to definitions and references for various code things. So very cool feature. But we use sourcegraph. We kind of partner with them for this, and they provide the code for that, which hooks into their backend. That's when things get interesting. Sourcegraph has both sourcegraph.com, which I love using for doing all sorts of code searching stuff, which there's probably many recordings of me popping in sourcegraph. But you can also just self-host this thing. So when I run into these dependency updates, obviously the goal is we want to make sure that this works and nothing breaks. Sometimes things are broken, and so I want to test this locally. Unfortunately, I can't test against sourcegraph.com locally because sourcegraph.com doesn't know about my local domain, and so it won't accept my requests. And sourcegraph.com will only any sourcegraph server will only give you data for things it knows about. So it knows about GitLab.com, GitLab, or GitLab. So if I'm looking at a certain blob here, it knows this repo with this commit on this file, sourcegraph. I knows this. I know this. I've already indexed it. Here's data for it. I try to use it locally, and I pass it, a URL it knows nothing about. It's not going to work. So what I used to do is follow sourcegraph's documentation for spinning up your own sourcegraph server that hooks into spinning up your own sourcegraph server. It has to index your local GDKs, repositories, and then when it's all set up and ready to go, now you can finally test out this integration bit. But that whole process is dependent on Docker. And on our Mac computers, we don't really have Docker anymore. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, do I whip out one of my Linux computers and try to update the GDK and get sourcegraph? Yes. That face thing is what keeps me kicking these MRs down the road a lot. And then it dawned on me. And I thought, wait, can I make my local GDK look like .com so that I can just talk to .com, sourcegraph.com? And the answer was yes.
Before we dive into the local solution, can I chime in with a question?
Yeah, please do.
Because I'm aware of one of those features that is pretty underused, I'd say. But on OpenMRs, I need to double check this, but aren't we having these development environments spinned up where you would basically be able to give this a spin on any
you
MR?
could do view app or something here.
Yeah, I need to double check, but that might be one of those use cases where this comes pretty handy. Like, I think these kind of things are super underused since they are pretty limited in terms of functionality. Like, you're kind of screwed if you have to update a feature flag or whatever it might be. But for such a use case, just like a dependency update, that might be kind of a quick solution.
So the challenge is I need to manually test this out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily about getting the GDK/GitLab server running, because that's a solved problem. But it's about getting a valid sourcegraph server running that knows about that environment.
Okay, so too many dependencies for the Vue app thingy.
Right. And so we don't even have like part of our, and I'm gonna not be using these terms probably correctly, but this is something that a GitLab admin or some IT admin of a customer of ours, they would have to set up their own sourcegraph server. It's not part of
Okay.
our
I
like
see.
omnibus kind of thing or whatever. So,
Mhm.
Or somehow make their server known to .com. And like sourcegraph has a lot of really great solutions to this, but for development environments, me testing out locally, it was great when it was like, oh yeah, I'll just spin up my Docker container and stuff and everything goes well. But since I don't have Docker anymore, that's a challenge. All of it to say, I was able to make GitLab.com on my browser. I was able to make this hit my local GDK, which was great. And so then, as long as I had a project that was real, so such that it mirrored like the same path that sourcegraph.com would know about, I was able to test this out and was like, oh yeah, so it worked. So I was able to get what the picture here.
So you've bravely been playing around with your etc host, or how did you achieve that?
Yes. So etc host is needed. So I'm gonna dive into what all was needed. Yes, etc host was needed. I don't think I have anything.
Which, for my understanding,
Yeah,
it's a while since I touched this thing. It's basically like a local DNS, isn't it? That is kind of the domain resolution on your local machine.
Yes, etc host is like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we update it for normally everything has GDK tests, but I was like, yeah, let me just do this with GitLab.com. I had to do this at a certain time though. If I did it too early in my process, then like running GDK reconfigure, which tries to reach out to GitLab.com, started to fail on me and stuff. So it's like,
oh, gosh.
The last step is this. The first step is updating in the YAML the host name from gdk.test to gitlab.com. And then I was able to use make cert to just make a certificate. I am already running HTTPS locally. So I was just able to make a certificate for gitlab.com. And so I just updated these and I kept everything and everything was great. Then I hit GDK reconfigure and it's good. There's one more problem to solve, which is this port. I can't make 443, the default HTTPS port, because that requires sudo access. And I didn't know how to dive into the bowels of GDK to figure out how to give Nginx sudo access for this.
Fair point, yeah.
So instead, after doing all this, which I'm not going to write, I'm just going to quit. Instead, after doing this, all of this, I ran GDK reconfigure. Once it was reconfigured, I started it and updated the etc host. I had to look up how do you give 443 access and Mac without root, and there's a really cool utility, but I've completely forgotten about it. So I just found it on a Google search, and I would recognize it if I saw it again. But it was basically some sort of networking tool that similar to like IP tables or something, which just told your local computer anything coming in to 443, just internally pipe it to 3443. And that just lets me hit locally. I can hit both GitLab.com or GitLab port 3443 and it worked. So I didn't know if that was gonna all work out, but I was surprised that it did. So I guess isn't really helpful to a lot of people, but if anybody
Easy.
ever
It
needs,
sounds easy as pie though. Like
it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. If anyone ever
okay.
needs to or integrating with something and they need their local GDK client to respond positively to GitLab.com in a way that like certain integrations are looking for this URL, it's possible. That's, I guess, the main takeaway.
Two small questions on this.
Yeah.
Do you see any tooling or something we could come up with to make this easier? Like
I need to write documentation for it. That's
okay, yeah, that would probably be a start. Like I see that like this to actually achieve this, what you just reported, it takes a lot of background knowledge for sure. And also quite a bit of work, as you just mentioned. So making this easier would probably, like I would have had fair troubles with this MR.
yeah, it's these MRs I are local setup dependent, and that's the most difficult thing with them is you just gotta set up this other service. Their Docker container is fantastic, but you need to set that up in a way that you can actually hit it in the network. You need to set it up with HTTPS, so it's like all of those steps can be a challenge. So but I had all that solved locally, but now we can't use Docker on Macs anymore. So that was disappointing. We can,
Gotcha.
like, I haven't taken the path looking into Rancher and other kind of Docker runtimes would be the other option. But yeah, thanks for letting me share that really random tidbit.
Yes, thanks for sharing. One more kind of follow-up question on this. Are you aware of any other dependencies that GitLab is having that would be like similar in complexity to update?
That's a good question.
Because hopefully that is not the usual. Like dependency updates are never the easiest, but usually there's basically just our code base as a consumer, in best case, even maybe a dev dependency. So it is kind of run the pipeline, cross fingers, but that is probably already quite a bit that you have covered by just doing so.
The thing that makes this one uniquely challenging, I think that, I mean, all of this setup is probably comparable to like Elasticsearch is a pretty solved problem in GDK, but I'm thinking maybe setting up some of our security tools, certainly setting up like the pricing, like the customers app and stuff related that has, has to deal with credit cards and things. Like there's some developer instances of like integrating that you need to, those are some challenges. The thing that makes this uniquely challenging, I would imagine other kind of third-party integrations challenging, is when the third-party thing needs to know about your app. And most of the time it can just live inside of it and it just responds to whatever data it's gotten. In this situation is like, no, these are two separate things that are independent, but our talk should have some background communication with each other, which is the case with sourcegraph.com. Because sourcegraph, like, just sourcegraph indexes every public thing. So you can see, like, here's all these GitHub repos. How can I look up? Oh yeah, and then here we go. Here's all these GitLab repos, and so you can create your own local instance of this, and won't have whatever repos. You can specify where it's going to look for things, whatever. But yeah.
Good stuff.
Kind of random. Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that. Cool. All right. Well, then the next thing I got is a MR to pair on. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right, I haven't looked at this, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but I am familiar with these workspace MRs. This is part of our newly named IDE team working on the remote development feature, where not only can you spin up the web IDE, but you can spin up the web IDE with a terminal and all sorts of goodies.
The web IDE with a terminal, like this is not the VS Code thingy. This is the web IDE with the old web IDE with a
No,
terminal.
this is the new. This is VS Code with the terminal, or what
Okay,
other lots of other kind of editors too. So it's very exciting.
okay. Cool.
Solving the hard problem of providing out of the box workspaces for projects.
Cool.
So contributors don't have to set things up locally. That's the large, ambitious goal, which there's a lot of great work on. But we're in the front end, so we don't have to solve those hard problems. So this is a follow-up to one of the MRs, I guess, I was creating this thing. I'm going to read the context first. Actually, before I do anything, I am going to assign myself as a reviewer. So when I was looking for this, it wasn't assigned to me. Oh, I can't assign it because I'm not signed into GitLab. David just pinged me, but I didn't actually get to be assigned as a reviewer. However, so let me pause sharing my screen and sign into GitLab so I can sign myself in. I can assign it to me as a reviewer. You can't see my screen, right?
I
Or is it
still
just
can.
pause? It's not doing anything. You don't see all of my passwords. All of my passwords aren't showing up on the screen right now, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, just kidding. It's just
Yannick's like, no, it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All right. Resume sharing. Here we go. All right. Now I'm signed in. Move our heads. This is the view app thing that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Really, yeah. It's really helpful. I like using it. It can be difficult though. I always forget how to like change feature flags on it.
Is it even possible?
It is. You can use the API to do it. But I've totally forgotten how to.
That's interesting. I'm pretty sure that is the first time I'm hearing this, and I'd be very surprised if we're having docs for this feature.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if you're an instance admin, there's an API endpoint that can be used to like change feature flags. At least that's how I've done this in the past, but I've forgotten.
Yeah, gotcha. And it is honestly not really delightful to use, as if you're running against barriers pretty soon.
Right.
So that is what is keeping me away from using this feature mostly.
Right. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna check out the changes locally. Oh, I might need to fetch the latest. Here we go. Let's get the latest changes. So maybe I can check this out. But before I dive into the code, I'm probably wanting to just get the overview of what is changing. Right. Great. We got it. Okay. So looks like we're changing some GraphQL files and then we're just modifying files. Okay. Not a whole lot of stuff. Let's see what happens. Fetches cluster agents from the project's root group. Sends all the required parameters to the workspace create mutation. We handle a missing dev file. Workspace is created. It navigates to the workspaces list. Okay. After this change, the workspace creation UI works with the real backend API implemented here. Okay. So here's where I'm at with these MRs. Because I've been pinged on a chain of the this remote development feature that we're fleshing out, which is under a little bit of pressure because they're trying to hit milestone dates and deliverables, and let me go back to obviously it's great when I can check it all out and test it myself. Some of this requires like setting up, if I was going to test it all in integration, some of it requires setting up like Kubernetes agent stuff. And it's like, I just told you how far we just talked about me setting up sourcegraph. Like, I don't want to have to set up all of these things.
Well, if you already have your Linux machine out, I'm just joking.
I know. But you know what's actually ironic is if I had like Kubernetes and Rancher set up, my source graphs would probably
it would solve all your problems.
I know. So instead, I'm kind of just looking from the front end, and I have ran the front just this because these are now being built in parallel to the back end and the front end. So I'm looking for like front end specific issues of debouncing inputs. Are we resetting the state like when other things in our form are changing? And like I'm looking for front end specific issues. So I'm not quite able to test out the whole picture yet, which is okay.
But for those inputs and things that you just mentioned, like, are you able to actually mock this UI somewhere? Or
yeah, to some extent. So and sometimes I'll like just turn off certain like checks in the code so that I can keep going forward just to test it out. So there's 2 user-facing changes, it looks like. That's great. Dev files are required on a project. The UI redirects the user to the workspaces list after workspace is created. Nice. Okay. Oh, nice. And here's all the instructions for doing this. Great. And so I won't need to actually, I don't think that any of this is integrating with the real backend yet, which is totally fine. But let me go ahead and run Bumble and Yarn. Or Yundle and Barn.
Let me just quickly skim through those things to reproduce this. So feature flag easy, license, yep. It should be doable without too many prerequisites.
Yeah, I think we can hop there anyways. Okay. Oh man, I hate this. But I guess it's too late.
The ears lint. Is it?
Yeah, but I guess it's fine. I'm not too worried about it. I do find it interesting. The one thing that's sticking out to me is like, oh, I didn't realize we're changing the name of this file. And like there's some level of convention here to the kind of file it's expected to be. So that was news to me. For instance, let's just go look at sourcegraph file. It looks for anything that's called dev file. So it looks like all right, I need it to start with dev file. You get this, and then there's a whole bunch of YAMLs. All right, and then I need it to potentially end with a dot or not. All right, these are all folders. Yeah, I guess it's mostly these YAML ones. I guess we don't necessarily have a .dev file. Okay, cool. All right, then I guess it's fine. I'm gonna trust that that we intended it to be devfile.yaml. That's fine.
Okay.
Here we have mock dummy data,
Removed.
which is which we don't need anymore. I guess we're just talking to the real backend now. That's cool.
That is pretty cool. Let me double check for a small thing. The comment which says like / what colon dummy data to support development. If you just on the left scroll down a little.
Yep.
That might be worth cleaning up as well. Or are we still having dummy data in there?
I think this is still, I think that it sounds like we still have this level of dummy data.
Okay, I didn't see that in the small diff I'm seeing on the MR.
Yeah.
Does make sense. Okay.
This was just we created a dummy hook for the workspace create mutation, but I guess
Fair
I
point.
guess we're all good now. Git group. All right, let's look at this view file. Okay, all right. Some background to this file. So I see that there's changes here. Could be potentially wise to look at the scope of what this component was like before. And this component was a renderless component encapsulating this query, which is cool. But now what's sticking out to me is, okay, it's a nice little renderless component with no state. Why are we setting this dot? You know?
Why not?
Well, we don't have any reactive state in this component.
Good point.
So for instance, setting this dot group path will actually not trigger any change like that this needs to refetch, because but now we do have the state.
So that does then make it a stateful but still renderless component. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, and I guess that's fine. Like we used to just, anytime this query did something, we make some calculations and then just submit those calculations and we're done. But now we have this chain of calculations happening. Or this chain of queries. And so all of this is only consumed by this create. Let me see how this gets consumed. So here we have all right. Yeah, we didn't even have to update this thing at all, because this is where we reference that little query thing. And so we just pass in a little project path, and then whenever there's a result, we get that back. But what's challenging here is we're going to have two queries. We have two queries. If I see what's going on. Oh my. Oh, I see what's going on. My concern was that we would emit results twice, because I see a line emit results here.
Yep.
And then I see a line emit results here. It's like, are we going to emit results while we're still waiting for results? And what's going to happen to the UI when we do that? But we only ever call this query when we have a group path. And then we don't emit the results. We wait for this query to do its thing. You know? Okay. So what do you think of what's going on here? How are you? What are your thoughts on this?
It's a right. I'm currently thinking about if there is any, like the point you just made with the emit results twice, if you could tweak the architecture to make this a little more obvious, because that is definitely something to stumble on. That definitely would be one thing. And another thing which I saw, which is completely optional. Let me just quickly double check if this is the actual file or if it is somewhere else in the XMR. Somewhere it is basically taking the error input and returning it into a GL alert, which is absolutely fine to do, but feeling
You're familiar with this problem.
Yes, that is what I'm about to say. Feeling a little bit like a one-trick pony here, but we could leave an optional comment that we could enhance this just in case.
That's a good idea.
If this is a problem, though, that is
where does that happen? Did you just notice that in somewhere?
Yeah, let me quickly search for it.
Oh, is it probably in the error handler of this thing? Yes. Oh, here, and when we create
133, that is what I'm looking for. So that looks risky to me, what we're doing there.
I see what you're saying. I will leave that as an optional comment. That's a good idea of something to think about. All right, I can't. But I actually. Oh, what were you gonna say?
I was just planning on coming back to the actual query, so not to get too distracted too much by this optional.
Yes. Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to leave it as a thought, non-blocking. I'll leave it as a question. Blocking. Okay. Are we guaranteed that this errors is user friendly? Not. I know someone who knows how to make errors user friendly. His name.
Oh my gosh.
Man, I was trying to think of a pun because I was thinking like he has a knack for this. I was like, it's not Yannick, it's Yannick.
Close.
So it's like, I can't do it. He goes by Yannick.
I'll take that.
It's to be a thoughtful improvement for a future smaller. Okay, great idea. The other, yes, getting back to here, I think you mentioned about it not being obvious.
Yes.
I agree with all of that. It's like, yeah, this is not obvious. And I would like to put out just like what could possibly go wrong here. And one idea that I have is this query passes, but this query fails.
Mhm.
And the main consumer of all this is going to lose all that intermediate state that could be helpful or used for something. And if we could need to retry, we would just have to somehow retry maybe all of it or whatever.
Mhm.
The other thing is what if while this is loading, we get a new project full path? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So if this loads, we get another project full path, and then this thing's going to emit,
Mhm.
and then maybe
But
this
the,
thing fails or whatever. Like,
mhm.
uh,
So we would
I
end up with having a defined project path, but an undefined group path.
yeah, possible. I think possibly you could get really interesting. So let me look at this get group cluster agents, group ID cluster agents. Could
So
we not?
am I getting this right? What this component is doing is basically doing two queries, kind of merging the answers together and then passing it along.
Yeah, and I see. Well, hey, we used to do this before. What? Oh, but it's because we're looking for the root group. It has because of subgroups. We're interested in only pulling from the root group. Does the GraphQL query have does the graph have a I was trying to break things. Let me clear out what I was trying to break. Let me go to query project type. Do we have like a root group? Look for group. There's a root. I'm going to move our faces. There's not a root group. Okay, it's just group. Does group have a reference to like what the root group is? Okay.
So just for me, you're basically trying to explore our GraphQL endpoint to see if we can get the information by just doing one query instead of two.
Yes. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And nothing's coming out. So I I don't know what comment to leave here. This clearly I read this and it didn't make me feel good, and that's a flag to me of like I want to say
It
something.
feels fragile though.
Right. I am concerned about uh I am concerned about how this is split up and not a cohesive thing.
Wild idea. What do you think about leaving a comment for a non-blocking follow-up thingy for the backend to actually, like, if there is a need for this kind of information, then it'd probably be a good idea to have a query. And querying two endpoints at the same time with all the risks that kind of involves, it's not the greatest thing. So as a band-aid, as a first iteration, whatever, this might be an acceptable solution. But on the long run,
Yeah.
it is not necessarily what comes to my mind when I dream about clean code.
That's such a way of saying it. All right. You know, at night when you're cuddling your babies and you're telling them about clean code, this isn't I don't want to scare them. This isn't what I bring up.
This isn't the path I'm referring to.
All right. To improve what's going on with the double query behavior. Have we considered adding a root cluster agents? Similar to, I just saw the word root here, root storage statistics. Similar to root storage statistics in the backend, which would pull from the current group if it's a root group, or find the root group and pull from that one. This way, we only have to have one
Query?
network. No, yeah, this way we'd only have to be once.
Report.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, that's definitely a thing. Here, I don't have a really great suggestion, but I am just gonna voice a concern about it. And I think we're concerned about any fragility here now that these queries are a bit dependent on each other.
Yeah, that 48 line looks slightly magical to me. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if we're having this covered by tests or something.
Maybe we can leave some comments describing the dependency here, and how line 48 is expected to trigger the other query. Here's a scenario. The scenario is project full path comes in. We trigger the project details query. Details query, which triggers the successful, triggers the before the query is completed, a new project full path comes in. Emit results will potentially contain some outdated data based on a race condition. Thinking. This is the thinking emoji. What do you think? Any thoughts on making this more cohesive? That's my big. That's all. That's the best I got. I wish I had a great suggestion to do here, but I really don't. What do you think?
I think that it is really, really hard to solve this as long as we're sticking to the double query. So therefore, I'm with you that I think it's great, or it's the best with the current scenario we're in.
Okay. All right. I know when we get off the call, it's gonna dawn on me of like, oh, this is what we should have done. Anyways. All right. It looks like we're deleting this fragment now. Do you have just 5 more minutes? I think we can finish.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're deleting this fragment now, which I find to be Oh, because when we create the workspace, we're not going to return the whole workspace. Okay. Get group cluster agents repository.
Can you help me with the add client we just saw? And if you go back to yes. So is this a query or a mutation? It is a mutation. It has the add client, so therefore I assume that it stays mocked, or is this like?
You're right, but we got rid of the mock. That's a really good point. It was a really good catch. I totally just blew through it.
Well, I'm still having questions though. Like, I'm not still sure. Like this could be just staying within the mock. Option A. Option B, I know that it is, how do I put it? Kind of a fancy Vuex alternative, more or less, to actually do some state management.
I know that this is just, I know from
with
context,
GraphQL.
this is intended to stay in the mock, but we've removed the mock.
Okay.
So I think something is off here. So
Okay,
it was a really
so this,
good catch. I totally.
This is not a good a new state management machine. This is actually something to be forgotten.
Yes.
Forgotten. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Is this mutation still client mocked? I saw we got rid of the mock in the init. But it's still a client here. And I think we got rid of these because having worked with debugging issues with this feature, we've implemented subscriptions. So rather than like I create a new one and then I have to, the Apollo way, shove it into the old query somehow, we implemented subscriptions in the list. So that was pretty fun. So I'm not super concerned about that, because if it's like, oh, if it's working, then I'm not worried about it, especially
cool.
at this stage. So okay. All right, we're almost there. Yeah, these are just queries doing their query things. These are just messages. I'm not super worried about those right now. Has dev file used to be true, and now it is null. Should we make it false?
To give any kind of feedback, I first would have to understand how come that we're changing the initial state of this.
It's a good question. I would guess assume because everything else is falsy, but maybe we want to keep as dev file as always a boolean. Do we want this to be false? I don't know. All right. Result, we get the data, a workspace create errors. I see, and we don't need to visit. Previously, I guess we were visiting this URL, but now we just push back to the router. That's great. And so the last bit are these specs. This is going to be the most complicated spec, the query one. This one, which is testing out. Oh, this is just mock data. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll take a quick look at the specs and then be done with this. So, cool. Yeah, thanks for your help, Yannick. That's helpful. I'll go ahead, because I'm gonna have another meeting right now, and I think the wisest thing to do is, rather than let the review just sit, I'm just gonna submit the review as is, so that Enrique can respond to things as I'm still looking at the specs. And
awesome, sweet. That was good fun. Thanks for sharing, and I'll catch you soon.
thank you, Yannick. Appreciate it. All right,
Have a good
bye.
one. See you.